Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Welcome back to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. I'm Gary Wilson, your host, and I'm glad to have you back on the show. If you wouldn't mind, if you wouldn't mind doing so, that is, if you haven't already done so, is please subscribe to the podcast on whatever your favorite channel is, including the one you're listening to now. We have 30 different channels we're on, so help yourself. And also, before you leave the internet, please visit globalinvestoragent.com. This is where you'll find real estate agents who are actually trained to work with us investors. They're not typical. They actually know how to identify, analyze, and negotiate on and off market deals anywhere in the country. So have at it. Oh, by the way, if you are an agent, there's no better time than now to click on the Learn More button, because we know what it's like out there. We're in the business. We see the volume. It's as low as it's ever been, 1.89 transactions per agent per year. Guys, that's no way to live. So do yourself a favor, add this to your model with the use of your license. Serve the investors like you serve owner occupants. Once you know how to do it, it's actually easier, and more profitable. I know you'll hear horror stories from other investors, but I promise you, once you know what you're doing, it's going to benefit you. So the best way to do it is to learn about that. Click on that link on the website, learn more, and you will get exactly what you need. So without further ado, we got a great guest today, Taylor Avakian, all the way from sunny Southern California. So Taylor, first off, thanks for joining us, man. You got a unique subject, and I love what you're doing. I love where you are too, by the way. So welcome aboard. Thanks for doing this.
Appreciate you having me, Gary. Thank you.
Glad to do it. Hey, if you wouldn't mind, most people in real estate, whether they're brokers or investors or both, didn't start off doing this. We started off in somewhere like I was in IT, mostly in the financial world. But what were you doing prior to this? Is there something that led you to this? If you don't mind shedding some light on that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I maybe atypical, I guess, from that perspective. This real estate as brokerage, and I sell apartment buildings in Los Angeles. This was really my first full-time gig. So out of college, I got my real estate specialization and a finance degree from the University of Alabama. I'm from Sacramento, from Northern California. So California born and raised. And it was always something in the back of my mind that was something that I could do as a career. I had some family friends growing up who were in the real estate space, commercial real estate. Some were brokers, some were developers, apartments, retail, industrial, all that stuff. So kind of grew up around that. And it was interesting for me. I knew I wanted to move down to Southern California. I had visited, family vacations, things like that. And the weather down here is incredible. So as you alluded to, and for me, graduated college about 6 months early, came back, was at home trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And summertime rolled around. Then my parents said, you know what? Hey, I think it's time for you to go and get a job. So I interviewed at a bunch of shops, San Diego, Los Angeles, and the company I'm at now, Matthews, was the first shop that offered me a job. And I was like, all right, let's do it. Let's go. So I moved down 2 weeks later and have been here ever since. So I think summertime of 2018 is when I started.
Nice. Well, it's interesting. You're where you are. You obviously have a couple of great universities and football teams, USC and UCLA, and yet you went to Alabama, who, of course, I mean, that's hard to beat. The Crimson Tide, I just historically. So I don't know. Did you become an Alabama fan while you were there, or did you stick to your roots?
Yes. It's hard not to. It is very hard not to become enthralled in the sports culture and like sports and football. That's everything to people from Alabama. Like we don't have a professional sports team, so it's Crimson Tide through and through. So yeah, I had an incredible time out there, and completely different culture than what I was used to growing up here in California. But it was a great experience nonetheless, and met a lot of great people. And so I look back on those times very, very fondly.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Sports and business are a lot alike. I mean, as far as, being competitive, being smart, being strategic, understanding the competition, things like that. So let's move into that then. And also, by the way, I do think it's interesting that you did jump right into it. And I admire you for that, because a lot of people don't do that. I dreamed about it when I was a kid. I actually drew floor plans at 8 years old. I mean, actual architectural grade floor plans. My grandfather taught me how to do that. But lo and behold, I went to school for computer science, worked at NASA, well, I guess I could probably tell you now, I tracked Soviet subs for the US Navy for a bit, and
Wow.
then got into banking, and that's what led me to real estate because I enjoy the application of money. And once I understood how it worked, investing became a lot easier. So, but you jump right into it, man. So kudos to you. And you're in one of the great areas. I know a lot of people will say, well, how can you afford to invest out there? Well, everything's relative, you know. It's
Hmm.
just there's a strategy for every market and every time. So if you wouldn't mind, uh, describe a little bit to us about what it is you're doing for the business and for the investor, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a apartment investment sales broker. So I help investors buy and sell apartment buildings primarily in Southern California. But the way that our company's structured, we have 23 or 24 offices now across the country and about 600 agents and employees. And so we've grown pretty big. When I started, I think we were at 80 and now we're over 600 in 5.5 years. So we've gotten pretty big. So a lot of what I do is helping owners here in Southern California with their apartments, but a lot of times too, investors want to go and exchange out of state. And so we have a pretty good network that we work with. And I work with a lot of other agents and other offices that are very cohesive in the way that we do deals. So I think just from that perspective, providing as much value as we can through different investment opportunities for the investor and your listeners.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. You mentioned multifamily. Is it generally like what's the range? Is it 10 units to 200 units, or what's your target property? I guess I would say, you know.
Yeah, typically private capital, private markets. So anywhere between, on the smallest end, 4 units, typically try to stay above 16 for what I do at this point in time, but 4 units, because you can get commercial financing on that all the way up to infinity units, if that's a thing. But typically between 5 and 50 million, I would say is where we do a lot of deal volume, price points, things like that.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I know a couple of really good investors out there. I've worked with them that actually been part of a mastermind group with some of them, and I don't think I'm allowed to say names on the air here, but but one of them you're probably familiar with. He's pretty big in the area. But I remember the last time I spoke to them, they had just bought. It was down in San Pedro, and it was like a 22 unit apartment building, and they bought it. I forget the price, but essentially they made their money back. It almost doubled their money, and it was a short period
Hmm.
of time, and it did encompass the pandemic years, at least partially, which was kind of interesting because they bought it pre-pandemic and sold it in the middle of the pandemic. But I can't tell you, probably could explain why the price went up so much. They did some remodeling, but not much. They did some rent increases, certainly. But I know San Pedro for a while has been a really good area for
Hmm.
growing. But any insight on that? You know uh, what can you tell us about the market there? Because I know people in California will invest there, and people not in California will just look at the pricing and think, "My gosh, how can I make this work?" But any insight on that? Maybe not just San Pedro, but like Long Beach. Do you go down that far? I know it's all LA County, but it's you
Yeah,
know,
yeah. I'm
okay,
typically like central LA City, but yeah, we've done deals, just the nature of the business everywhere. And so the typical strategy for Southern California, because California as a whole is rent controlled, and then certain cities like Los Angeles have stricter rent control laws. The play over the last decade has really been go in, buy a property that's below market rate rents, either
mhm,
buy the tenants out, pay them to leave, or have some vacancies. You renovate the units and you go and try to get market rate rent. And so, depending on how below market your rents are, I mean, you can see a double 2x equity multiple pop in a short amount of period of time. And I think, 2012, 13, 14, 15, there were a ton of great buys because of after the recession, property
yeah,
values kind of came down. And then from 2017 onwards, we just saw an immense amount of rent growth because of
mhm,
the shortage of housing and supply here in Southern California and California in general. And so
mhm,
if you have a path to increase the NOI to a certain number, The cap rates here are typically seen. Banks view California as a pretty stable and safe, A-tier market, and so they're willing to lend pretty aggressively from a interest rate perspective. So when the interest rates were low, it didn't take much to increase the NOI to then sell at a pretty solid cap rate as well. So that's really how a lot of these investors made a ton of money over the last decade in Southern California.
Yeah. What's interesting is I started teaching real estate agents how to work with real estate investors probably 15 years or maybe longer than that. But the first time I taught in California was 2015. And I always gather the statistics, because people are interested in numbers and so forth, and rightly they should be. But in 2015, the percentage of renters in the state of California was 36%, which was about average for the country. The last time I taught there in 2019, it was up to 46% statewide, the percentage of
Mm-hmm.
rentership. It may be 48 or even over 50% now. I don't know, but I remember one area specifically, it was West Beverly Hills was
Mm.
82% rentership, you know, in
Wow.
beautiful area. I mean, and these are
Mm-hmm.
nice, 20, 30, 40 unit buildings. And I'm thinking there's a formula here. And I just thank you for sharing that. Because that sheds a lot of light on that you know, I guess, false assumptions that people, including me in the early days, had, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there a favorite deal you can think of that maybe used a creative acquisition strategy, financing wise, or something that was just the way you went about finding it? It was like the diamond in the rough that somehow or another seemed to slip through the cracks, or something that really pique people's interest.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So I guess maybe the way that I find the opportunities to be and list properties and off-market deals and stuff like that may be interesting, but I do a lot of cold calling, a lot of prospecting on the phones. And throughout my whole career, like it was taught to me when I first started, you got to make a lot of cold calls, a lot of phone calls, reach out to people and speak to them on the phone. So I would say the majority of the deals that I've worked on and dug up and formed relationships with owners have been through the phone. And so in particular, like we've dug up and I've been able, the first deal I sold is actually unique in that it was a $9.5 million apartment building that
Hmm.
was the first listing that I ever got. Right. And most people are like, 9.5 million, holy crap. And
Yeah.
I would probably agree with you. I was like, holy, dang,
Yeah.
that's a big one for the first one, right? But that was all through picking up the phone and calling these owners and being consistent. I mean, in the beginning of my career, I was making 500 to 600 cold calls a week, and I did that
Mhm.
for about 2 years consistently. And I'm still have about 300 to 350 calls a week at this point in time. But it's just hammering away and prospecting. And at the end of the day, right, as a real estate agent, broker, like my job is to generate leads, generate opportunities, and have
Yeah.
the connections and the investors like yourself in place to know, okay, here's what Gary's looking for. I can put the pieces together. I'm the conduit to deals. And so
Yeah.
if the local knowledge and presence and understanding of what is a good deal, what an investor like yourself is looking for, or any investors out there, I think having a good broker investor relationship is knowing that about that person and being able to quickly off the top of your head say, okay, this would be a good deal for Gary, or this would be a good deal for Mike, or X, Y, and Z. So for me, that's been really where a lot of these specific unique deals like that one that I listed up came to fruition, was through that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny as I'm listening to you, I remember another friend of mine. We were also in a mastermind group together. He's down in Long Beach. He's an engineer by trade, and his very first property was a 94 unit building. And I'm like, Andy, are you sure you want to do this, man? I'm like, I'm Mr. Conservative. I started off with one home. It was a 4 bedroom ranch in Virginia Beach, and I split it with my college roommate Socrates. We bought it together, and we rented
Wow.
out the other 2 rooms to bring in extra income, and their extra income paid a rent. But I mean, this is going to sound crazy. $63,000. That's what that was, and it
Wow.
didn't need any work. I mean, but nowadays that house is worth over 500,000. But Andy brought down that monster of a deal in '94, and now a lot of us would invest with him. We would do some joint ventures and some capital raises with him. He just had that engineering brain, man. He just was,
Hmm.
and he had the discipline to stick with the numbers. So a lot of investors, I see that when they make mistakes, it's usually because the numbers tell them the truth, but they want the property so bad they're willing to fudge a little bit, and that's when you start to, you know, increase your risk.
Hmm.
Um, so when it comes to that kind of stuff, what do you, how do you, when you work with clients? I'm sure you have some, just like I've seen, that they'll have some success. They get a little bit, maybe overly confident, and they start pushing a little bit because the market's changing. That's a famous quote. And I know the market's going up. I better lock into this now. I know I'm paying more than I should, but it's going to go up anyways. Any words of advice for the listeners? Because I know they all are going to come across this at some point. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. The best investors that I've seen who've had the best results from their investments, what differentiates them is a specific set of knowledge and skills and the actual structure, I guess you could say, to be able to go and execute on that business plan. And what I mean by that is they have connections with the city, they have the contractors in place, they have all the pieces in place to go and execute their business plan, which they've, funneled down to a T, and they know how to add value. They know their strategy and adding value, and they look for properties that fit exactly that mold. And those are the ones who I've seen have the most success here. And it's like, if it doesn't fit that criteria and they can't work around figuring out how to add value in specific ways, then it's a no-go, right?
mhm.
And actually, what's also interesting to note is the investors who do really well, they're specific, but they're not so specific where everything has a price for them, right?
Mhm.
Every building makes sense at a certain price. And so if they can offer that specific price or negotiate to the price that makes sense for them, like, they will buy that deal, and they're open and willing, and they have the ability to go and do that, they can move very
Mhm.
quickly. And so I think having your set parameters and not straying too far away from that, especially when you're starting out or just beginning, or even if you've been doing it for a long time, the people who lose their hat are the ones who push maybe a little bit too quickly or too high, or make their assumptions too big. You've seen that across the board over the last year with where
Mhm.
interest rates have gone. Those are the ones who really get in trouble. And the ones that have been the most successful that I've seen and worked with have just stuck to their guns. They've stuck to their playbook. They've adjusted when the market's adjusted. But at the end of the day, it's like, here's what we do it well, and we'll buy stuff that fits that.
Did you know that you can participate in class every Monday? We call it Monday Night Live, 7 p.m. Eastern, with me and dozens of other investor agents from around the country, in fact, the world. Every Monday, totally free. No selling, no recruiting, just straight up education on anything and everything in real estate. And we have a lot of good guests coming on once or twice a month, bringing in expertise on subjects like how to buy a house with crypto. Okay. How about them apples? What about AI? How's AI affecting our business? How about the metaverse, blockchain processing? We're already using it in title work. So come on to Monday Night Live. Be ready to take notes and ask questions, because it's live and engaging, and you get to participate by asking questions and meeting others. So we'll see you there. Go to realestatewithgarywilson.com, click on the resource tab, drop down, and you'll see Monday Night Live. And in there, you can see one of the most recent classes. But more importantly, you can register for class as many as you want going up to like the end of the year, I believe. So in any case, do that. We'll see you on Monday Night Live. Look forward to meeting you in person. Take care. Yeah. I love the insight. I want to go back a little bit to something too. We talked about, when I asked you for an example, and you gave, one of the strategies, looking for places that have below market rents. So kind of a two-part question. You already answered part of it, which is, how can landlords maximize the property value when you're under rent control regulations? And part B is, what other strategies are there for, property value enhancement? I mean, is there,
Mm-hmm.
other than what you just that gave us already, is there anything that's complementary to that, or in addition to that, that we can use?
Yeah, of course. So from the property value enhancement perspective, I think what a lot of people miss, really good pictures of their property when they renovate it and when they're trying to lease it and get the highest amount of rent for it. Like, a lot of people neglect really good photos, and that can change dramatically, especially
Oh
when
yeah.
we're talking about LA. when you're going from, $150 here and there across the units, especially when it's rent controlled, like that's a big amount of value if the cap rate's historically 4, 5, 5.5%, right? It's all on a multiple. So
Mhm.
I think a lot of investors neglect the importance of how the property shows. And what included in that is the actual amenities and then the external features, right? If you're renting, if I'm a renter and I'm going to go tour a property and it looks nice outside, it's well kept, it's in a good area, I could see myself living here and, being able to have, see myself actually having almost like a home, that will entice me to pay a little bit more. Maybe I'm willing to pay a little bit more in rent. And so I think all of those things, from the amenities to the interiors to the renovation styles to specifically attracting people to the property itself, all of those add up to being able to get that extra little bit in rent, which actually is a ton of value when you look at it from a cap rate multiple perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. So, and here's an interesting question. Because I've been out there so much, obviously parking is at a premium. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. So, have you ever come across a property where there was an opportunity to add value simply by adding parking? I mean, because then you can increase the rents, and even if you can't, people were more likely to rent if everything's considered equal, if they have off-street parking versus not. But
Hmm.
how many have you seen opportunities like that where parking was a part of the strategy?
In Los Angeles, the land is very hard to come by. So I've
Yeah.
rarely seen people adding parking spots. Actually, it's kind of the opposite. So in Los
Wow.
Angeles and California, we have a shortage of housing. So they've
Okay.
put laws and bills into place for something called ADUs, additional dwelling units. And what I've actually seen a lot of
Mhm.
investors do to add value to the properties is convert some of these tuck under parking spots to actual rental units. And the laws are written in a way where you can do that fairly,
Mhm.
compared to how it takes for an actual development. It's more streamlined. It's definitely not easy compared to other parts of the country. But
Yeah.
if you're able to get, $2,000 for an ADU studio rent, like even if you lose, let's say $100 a month on what you could rent that other unit for because it has parking, that
Yeah.
actually makes sense. It's a numbers thing. The return on cost of doing that is significantly higher than if there was no unit whatsoever. So not a lot of parking space creation, but actually some parking space conversion.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I lived for 5 years up in Toronto, Ontario, in Canada, and the the shortage of housing became so acute that the local building code office for Toronto was allowing homeowners for a period of time to add basement apartments, converting their basements to apartments, and they were waiving the occupancy inspections, and that's just unheard
Wow.
of. But
Jeez.
a lot of people were doing that and using it for Airbnbs. People don't realize Airbnb isn't just in coastal towns. Airbnb can be in anywhere where
Hmm.
there's demand for business travelers, people coming in to see sporting events, festivals, concerts, where there's colleges, parents come in to visit their kids, there's graduation. I mean, it was just an amazing opportunity for people to make more money. Plus, as you might imagine, Toronto is also under rent control. And while the rents are relatively high, there's just nowhere else to build. And
Hmm.
once you have your property, you do have to be creative. I've seen some pretty amazing things. The thing I love about LA is I've seen a lot of like rooftops converted into to decking,
Hmm.
and people, it's like additional outdoor space. And as long as you have common access, all the tenants in that building can go up and use it. And it's
Hmm.
year round. I mean, that's the forecast in California, Southern California is it varies widely between 72 and 73 degrees year round.
Yeah, I know. We're very fortunate. And it's funny you say the roof decks too, because for a while now, roof decks were like new developments. People were, you got to have a roof deck. You got to have a roof deck. And there's
Yeah.
definitely still some demand for that. But we're seeing in these newer construction, newer developments, different amenities are attracting different people. For a while back, like the theater was something people were putting theaters
Yeah.
in the apartments and whatnot, and game rooms and work from home stations. And I think now the work from home is popping off again. Actually, theaters are some sort of drive a physical gym, something like that, that's driving a lot of renter demand. So there's these shifts in what renters want and amenities. And so you got to stay on top of that and track that. And a lot of these big institutional companies are obviously doing that. So you can kind of, if you're a smaller investor, you can follow suit and see, okay, what are they doing? What's working? Where the rent's coming in? What's my competition doing? And try to differentiate yourself a little bit from your building versus theirs.
Yeah. Yeah, I have one of my sisters actually for a long time lived down in La Jolla. I know it's 2 hours
Oh,
away,
I
but
love La Jolla.
similar
That's where
architecture. I
I
mean, they
fell in
just,
love with LA,
yeah,
or Southern California, excuse me.
yeah. I mean, you take advantage of the hillsides. The thing, it's crazy because on the East Coast, only the front row people have the ocean view. You know, there's no way to get ocean.
Mm-hmm.
In California, it's all about the view, and
Yeah.
you could be in a across from a canyon 3 miles away and still see the ocean. You know, so
Mm-hmm.
but they had a beautiful place. I mean, a circular stone stairwell built into the hill going up to a hot tub overlooking the Pacific, and it's
Jeez.
just an amazing place. But hey, wanted to ask you this. You mentioned that you spend a lot of time on the phone, calling people. So I imagine you developed the skill of networking pretty well. How important is that to the investors themselves? Can you talk about the necessity of networking and team building, even if you're not a broker, if you're an investor? I mean, to me, it's been a provided a lot of opportunities. And I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Any particular strategies you use?
Networking is essential in real estate and what we do. And I would say in a lot of industries, we're in a people business, right? And so the
Mhm.
more people you know, the more people you're connected with, you become friendly with, or just have some sort of value transfer that you can do to them, I think is extremely important, especially when you're from an investor's perspective. Like the investors that I like to work with are always, Taylor, hey, what's going on? What are you working on? Like, you got anything for me? They're staying on top of me like I'm staying on top of these sellers, right? They're following up, they're building the relationship, they're building the rapport, we're going and grabbing lunch, we're getting dinner, we're meeting at golfing, whatever it is. We're constantly, the best investors are always trying to stay top of mind because there's so many buyers out there. And once you
Right,
get a certain length of your career, a
right,
buyer's a dime a dozen, right? So being able to set yourself apart as an investor, building that rapport, building that constant communication, and staying top of mind of the
mhm,
broker. I mean, most of the good deals are the ones that you get from the brokers. I would say a lot of the deals that
yep,
you get that you've bought are from brokers. So I think building those relationships is vitally important, especially if you're going to go and explore a new market. Like, reach out to the brokers, introduce yourself, tell them exactly what you're looking for, see if they have anyone they can introduce you to. Give
mhm,
them, some value up front, and just stay top of mind, and build the relationship as much as you can. And again, try to add value. Like, when I'm working and calling owners, I'm trying to add as much value through knowledge or information or something for them
mhm,
to be valuable to them. I would say the same thing goes for investors. Provide some sort of value. Like, what are you seeing in the rents for your properties? Where are you seeing certain changes? What have you heard? What knowledge or something can you imbibe to, or to give to the broker to actually
mhm,
feel like, oh, wow, okay, this is a person that I should stay close with as a broker to an investor.
mhm.
So I think networking is vitally important. And if you're not doing it, start. And if you're doing it, continue and push harder and find different ways to build relationships with anyone and everyone who's associated with what you do.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And you know, belonging to associations is a great way to do that. And, there's an association for every possible hobby and walk of life that you can imagine. Um, but one of the benefits I've seen too personally is staying in touch with other brokers and other investors on a regular basis. It does, like you said, it creates top of mind presence. So when an opportunity pops up, they think of you first. And the
Mm-hmm.
other thing is this: one of the ways to grow exponentially is to partner with other people instead of just buying a property solely yourself. Partner with other people. I mean, two or three people can take down a much bigger elephant than any one single person can. And
Mm-hmm.
when you network and you build those relationships, not just the other investors but the brokers themselves will say, "Hey, I know somebody who would probably be a good partner for you." So you get your all those opportunities become available to you. they wouldn't be there if you just take the solo individual route
Hmm.
and act like a hermit. I knew investors, I used to do that. They just want to get their properties, make their money, and turn the world off. But man, there's a lot of opportunities that come about because you build those knowing, liking, trusting relationships, and then you know who you can rely on. Um, hey, I know we're going to get short on time here, but there's a few other subjects I want to touch on. I'm gathering you probably have access to a lot of data and websites you use, but what can you tell us about um, market trends? How do you identify them? And like forecasting, what are some of the tools you use in those activities?
I think, yeah, a good question. A lot of periodicals. I read a lot of Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, AGLA, AOA, Apartment Association of America, I believe. Globe Street, CoStar, BizNow, Loop, like all of the periodicals I'm reading. I get the emails all the time, and I'm constantly trying to stay up to date on what's new, what's happening, what trends are headed in what direction. From a market specific, we have access to CoStar, Crexy. We use from prospecting, Land Vision. We use LexisNexis. So it's a lot of softwares, a lot of tools, but I think the Twitter as well, actually. I think there's a lot of good information and
Yeah,
insights that you can learn from Twitter, which I've been able to kind of build up personally, which has been really fun and exciting. LinkedIn, there's good follows and people who have good information on there. But just like being in it, engulfed in it, learning outside of the working hours. When you got some free time, read a investment book, read a new article that came out on some developments. Just be in the know, be in the space, and I think they'll come up and you'll notice them, and then you can start capitalizing and reading them and learning them, and you just build it through exposure. And my experience is what I've been able to do.
yeah. That's a key point. The two things I want to reinforce here for all the listeners here is um, when you're immersed in the business, like podcast is just one of the things I do. I actually run a team of what we call investor agents all across the country. We're in 37 states and a couple of Canadian provinces, and just being part of that activity every single day in multiple parts of the country is what keeps me informed. It's when you do that, it's like you're in tune, you're aligned with the market, and you understand what the market's doing and where it's going instinctively and intuitively. And the other thing you mentioned, really important. I just brought this up to my team. I teach a class every Monday night called Monday Night Live. It's open to the public, investors and agents alike. But I told him, I said, one of my early successes came about because I didn't just join the local investor clubs like Acre and RIA. I joined a local apartment association, and it was better than all of them. I mean, I got to meet all the big owners. And the first time I went there, I paid my 80 bucks for the dinner and looked around. I was brand new. I was probably 35 years old. I picked the table that had the oldest looking guys. So I thought, well, they're not going anywhere. They're going to sit there all night long. They're not going to get up and mingle because they got their group. I just came in, hey, can I mind if I sit here? They took me in, took me to the wing. Two of them in particular, and one of them ended up really teaching me a lot. He was a big owner, big buildings. I bought some of his buildings from him. I helped him sell some of his buildings later on. And in that relationship, I can tell you his name. His name's Garrett, was Gerhard Flufelder. He's no longer with us, but 72 years old when I met him, and the guy was still hustling. It's amazing. And the other guy was a golfer. He was the golf course pro, and who invested, and kept inviting me to golf. I kept saying no, I don't have time, and he kept after me. Finally, I went golfing. I said, now I know why you want to go golfing. There's these other three guys that are also building owners.
Mm-hmm.
So really, if everybody listening, join your local apartment association. Is well worth it. Probably one of the best things I've ever done. And I'm gonna Taylor, I'm gonna mention this when this podcast gets published. I'm gonna make sure all my students listen to this because you specifically pointed that out. It couldn't be more timely.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, a couple more things here. All right. So we know no market ever stays the same. What can people do today to prepare for real estate cycles? No. The good news is no down market ever stays down. It always goes back up. The bad news
Mm-hmm.
is every up market always goes down. But that's really not good news or bad news. It's just simply a fact of life. And there are ways to prepare for that. We have strategies we use that work in any market. Well, I shouldn't say that. We have strategies for every market, but how can people prepare themselves right now when there's uncertainty in the world, politically, economically, just it's crazy. But any recommendations there?
Yeah, get your ducks in a row. Understand what from acquisitions to dispositions or to value add or whatever stage of investment your plans are. Get the pieces in place now so that when you have the ability or when you find that deal that is going to make sense and fits your criteria, you are able to execute very quickly. So whether that's from bankers to contractors to brokers to plumbers, electricians, whatever it is, have those people lined up so that you can go and execute when that opportunity comes. Because as we all know in real estate investments, there's a ton of things that are always on market. There's a ton of stuff always available, but not everything is a good deal or fits what you're looking for. So when that one does come up, you got to move quick because the good ones don't stay around very often. So I would say become vertically integrated and having your ducks in a row so that when you are ready to go and act, you can act swiftly and quickly and go get that deal.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, one more question. Everybody asks this, I get asked the same question, but what do you see coming down the road as far as like government policy, lending programs? Where do you see the market leaning towards or leading towards, I guess? If you have any insight there. And we won't hold you to it because we know as soon as we think we have it figured out, the government will print
Yeah.
more money or they'll do something else. And so
If I had a magic 8 ball, I think I would be very wealthy, or wealthier than I am now. So
yeah,
where do I see the market going? So I think it's going to get tougher before it gets easier. Truthfully, there's a lot of external pressures. There's a lot of money that's been printed. There's a lot of factors that are outside of specifically the real estate market that affect the real estate market. And my feeling is we're headed into a deeper recession. What's interesting is next year is going to be an election year. So a lot of things change and stuff like that. So I don't know in terms of the short term within the next 12 months, but I do know, or it feels like to me that long term we're in for a longer recession, a longer downturn than I think maybe people hope or are aware of. So, stay lean, be prepared. I had some older brokers tell me, they're like, hey, we saw this in 08. It went longer than people expected in 1 and 2. So just store up, get that war chest going, don't go and spend the extravagant money on whatever it is. If you can't afford it, just be prepared, get ready to act when you can. And so I feel like over the next 12, 24, 36 months, we're going to see a lot of opportunities to buy, a lot of really good deals, a lot of people who are ready to sell. And they're just like, I'm just want to be done with it. So you can take advantage of that. But I think we're going to be in for a longer road than maybe people expect.
Yeah, I agree with you too, and I appreciate you sharing that. By the way, you mentioned something, and I know every Boy Scout out there was pumping their fists, going, "Yeah," because the Boy Scout motto is "Be prepared." you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the other thing I can tell people is, even in the last recession, this is maybe unusual, but the brokerage I started January 2008, the recession had already started. Our business grew the next 3 years. The first years of the recession literally grew sixfold, the double 3 years in a row.
Wow.
And the one thing I can tell people is real estate, the properties don't go anywhere. They don't disappear. It's not like a company that you own stock in that could just go belly up. The land is always going to be there. The buildings, well, you could raise a building, but usually the building's going to stay there. What I'm getting at is the properties just simply change hands. And you have to decide, is your role going to be the person who's releasing the properties, or the person who's acquiring the properties, or the person like Taylor who's helping the transaction, right? Somebody's got to be the broker and bring the deal together. You can play one of those roles. You just got to decide which one you want to be in. Um, the sun will rise again tomorrow. Again, every market goes up and every market goes down. It's not time to panic. It's time to prepare. Like Taylor said, be prepared. So get yourself some education. follow up with. So Taylor, I really love what you're doing and I appreciate all that you shared today. How can people get a hold of you? What's the best way for them to reach out to you if they have questions or want to maybe participate with you in a transaction?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Search my name, Taylor Avakian. My phone, email, all that stuff is pretty public. I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn. Those are the main social media platforms that I'm posting on regularly and interacting with people. So you can, if you search my name, you'll find me. Send me an email, give me a call, whatever it is. I'm happy to help, even if it's point you in the right direction. Again, like you said, Gary, it's all about connections and networking and things like that. So I'm happy if I can't help you out, pointing you in the right direction. But yeah, just search my name and you should be able to find me.
Cool. So everybody, I know if you're driving, don't write this down. We'll put it in the show notes. You can re-listen to this later too. But Taylor's name, it's Taylor, typical spelling. Last name Avakian, it's V as in Victor, Akian. Taylor Avakian. Victor. But look him up on social media, guys. Any deals going on right now that you're working on in LA? People can maybe participate in anything active.
Yeah, we got it quite a few. Just if you want to go on our website, you can search my name and see everything we're working on. We got some mobile home parks too. So if you're interested in that space, give us a call. But if you're interested in taking a look at some Southern California real estate, want some off-market deals or what I'm working on, just shoot me an email and happy to send you over everything we got.
You got it. Well, for everybody listening, just to put the exclamation point on this, if you look at what's happening in the world of policy, government policy, the policy today is leaning towards providing more rental housing. It just is all over the country and in Canada too, for listeners in Canada. I mean, California specifically has a program now. It's started in the Bay Area where they're incentivizing developers, builders, and investors who provide affordable housing in the rental market. Um, they're offering to pay the rents 100%. There is a caveat there. You can't decline people for financial reasons, but you're paying all the rent, right? So, and also there's lenders out there right now that are offering some very good interest rates and terms to finance multifamily purchases. So there's a big push policy wise, and of course with the lenders too, to provide more rental housing. That there's a big need for it in the country. And instead of fighting it, maybe your heart says, I want more homeowners. I do too. But you know what? When you're in a boat rowing, you want to row with the stream. Row downstream. Don't row upstream. Make life easier. There likely will be, a lot of wealth made in these next few years. You can choose to be part of it. So, thanks for listening. Thank you again, Taylor, for participating. You guys, if you could please leave a review for this. That's the currency that makes our podcasters world go around. We don't actually get paid for this. It's a community service and we love to do it. We love to serve and teach. It's what we do. So your review really helps a lot in that regard. And while you're out there, go visit Taylor Avakian. All right. And also one last stop would be the globalinvestoragent.com website. Pick yourself an investor agent. We're in 37 states in the US and a couple of Canadian provinces. If you are an agent, again, not time to panic, time to prepare. Just click on the learn more button and figure out how you can make this part of your brokerage business model. It's gonna save your bacon coming down the road here. I can promise you that. But everybody, take care of yourselves. We will see you on the next Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. In the meantime, take care and God bless you and your families.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.